Yep, we're lathing. Made a bunch of chips. Turned the outer tube thingy away to my mark. Got a nice flat edge there. Got to finish up the tip, and then we'll drive that home. Ha, that's what I said was gonna happen. Nice. Taking it nice and easy here because it's easy to take material off, but it's kind of hard to put it back on. If I flat cut right to the end of that little bevel there, well, we'll actually still be a hair long, but somewhere in there. Absolute perfection. Nobody breathe. Yes. It's even still kind of sort of straight. Almost like I knew what I was doing. Now I just have to do all of that a second time. There we go. All right, I might have gotten a hair carried away on that one. It's just a skosh short, but we can solve that with adjustment. One forever later, those push rods are back in, everything's preloaded, and we're good to go. Oh yeah, anyway, I'm Jamie, this is Dead Dodge Garage, and this is a 426 Hemi on our Mopar Or No Cart run stand. And it's almost ready to make exhaust noises. Evan here at Rocket did most of the hard parts. You can see the exhaust manifolds are mounted with shiny new hardware. We've got a 4-speed bell housing and a flywheel on the back of this thing temporarily. We have to use these to get it mounted on the cart. Once this engine's done on the cart, those are going to find their way to the back of one of my Hemis. Anyway, now it's intake fitment time, and then valve covers can happen. Before the intake can go on the engine, this tray needs to be installed on the underside. This is to keep hot oil from splashing up on the intake and raising the temperature of the incoming air. This is an original tray, but reproductions of these recently became available. Places like Mancini sell them for, I don't remember, $100-something, I think. Make sure you properly torque and Loctite these little bolts. You don't want those falling out. Now, dropping the intake manifold on here isn't going to be quite as straightforward as it should be. As I pointed out in a previous video, the intake surface on the head and the china wall here do not meet at this corner the way they're supposed to do. And that is almost certainly because this deck has been machined down. The more that ends up cut, the further off this will be. Here's a single gasket from Mr. Gasket dropped in place, and you can see it almost meets the corner there, but not quite. That means when we drop our intake on there, it's not quite going to fill the gap, and that is a problem. Back in the bad old days, Mopar Performance sold a 120 thousandths thick intake gasket for Hemis to solve this exact problem. Unfortunately, those have been out of production for a very long time, and I didn't have anywhere to source one from. So we're going to solve this problem a different way. No, we're not going to spend a bunch of money having custom gaskets made. We're just going to silicone two together. The thickness ends up being just about perfect. They probably don't even need to be siliconed together really, but I am a bit concerned that they might not crush together and seal in the middle. Also, I wanted to ensure that the ports were aligned correctly. Side note, these gaskets aren't very nicely cut. There's our double gasket dropped in place. As you can see, this surface is just above the corner. So when we drop the intake on, we'll have a little bit of room to squish that gasket and ensure a good seal. Strangely, these old gaskets we took out do have what looks like a crush pattern. I don't know how that's possible. Anyway, it's going to be better now. Now, we're certainly not going to double up the cork end seals. You know, typically I wouldn't use these at all, but they look right on the Hemi, and with our doubled up gaskets, it looks like they fit in the gap almost perfectly. I'm thinking I might silicone them. If this was a big block, there would be a valley tray bolted to these locations using hold-down rail things. Interestingly, some Hemi intake gaskets have the circles for those bolts, and the factory intake has the spots for them, but this engine didn't have those bolts when I took it apart. You wouldn't be able to put the middle one in there anyway, so I don't know why they even bothered casting them in. A little bit of oil seeping past would be one thing, but the real concern with these is because there are no bolts or anything, they can just slide out. In fact, some builders, including one that assembled this engine in the past, put little stake marks down these china walls to try and lock them there. I think this bit of silicone should do the trick. It's pretty interesting how similar this is to a later 90s Magnum engine, what with the vertical intake bolts that are pretty small and the tray on the bottom. Anyway, I'm using the same technique I always use for those, which is just use a small handle and go slowly, gradually, side to side, front to back. Go over these bolts several times and just kind of make sure it's sitting down straightish. It did compress the cork a little bit more than I would have wanted. I think it's all right. Pretty sure it's going to stay there, and this closed up, so it should be fine. I was going to grab an inspection camera, but I can actually see down into a couple intake ports thanks to this dual carburetor setup. We're just a hair low. I don't know if you can quite see it, because the stupid thing won't focus, but Yeah, I'd say it's like a gasket thickness worth lower than the port in the head. It looks like the intake port is a hair smaller anyway. I think it's gonna be fine. It's gonna have to be fine. During pre-lubing, I got a good bit of oil down a couple of these spark plug holes. I said I was going to vacuum that out, and I've now done that using the shop vac, a length of vacuum hose, and a rag shoved in the end. I thought these intake studs were missing, but I was mistaken. I did come up with those. So the intake is fully installed. I even got the throttle hold down bracket and the 2 return spring brackets in place. Some of these bolts are wrong. They're like generic hardware store things. Pretty sure they should all have heads like this. Not that I'm an expert on that or anything. Anyway, we're gonna run it like this for now. It'll probably get some more correct hardware later. I've got the distributor installed. The oil pump drive went in first with the slot facing roughly front to rear. When I drop this in, the rotor points at what should be number 1 on the cap. I'll get these on in a little bit here, but obviously we need valve covers and plugs first. I've now set our shiny new Felpro gaskets in place, and after a little bit of hand cleaning, it's time to install the valve covers. Finally! Rather unfortunately, these covers will have to come off again to paint the engine. And to do that, the spark plugs have to be removed. When you do that, fresh oil will come rushing in around the tubes and fill the chambers again, causing it to smoke when it's fired up the next time. Because Hemi, it is what it is. These valve covers are in really good shape and the paint is pretty nice, so we're not going to do anything with them aside from cleaning. They'll get another round of that before we finally finish this Hemi Cuda. There's a little repair in this one. I think Trev here at Rocket actually did that some years back because this thing had a mysterious oil leak. Valve covers are on and snugged. I did this as I always do with a speed wrench and a 7/16 socket. I do not torque these to any spec. I go by feel, crisscross, back and forth, like 4 or 5 times, snugging them down evenly until everything feels right. And then I go back and check them later. And then I go back and check them later again. Dug around and found some replacement carb base gaskets. I would have reused the old ones, but they looked like absolute crap. Now I can drop the dual Carter carburetors in place. These carbs were working great when we pulled them off, so we should be good to just run these. If we'd had a single 4 manifold on hand, we probably would have run our known good Carter 650 or whatever it is for engine break-in and then swapped to the duals later. But this will be fine. Oh, here's a neat bit of 426 Hemi trivia. I can't remember what year this happened in specifically, but toward the end of the 426 Hemi's run, the mold for the factory dual quad intake was damaged. So all of the late ones show this repair. According to Mr. Wizard, Scott Smith with Harms Automotive, that was late in 1969. Maybe this is obvious, I don't know, I'll say it anyway. These carbs are not currently beautiful enough to send out the door on a fully restored 426 Hemi. They're good enough for our break-in. Down the line, we'll clean them up, get them looking good. That'll happen around the same time the engine is painted and fully detailed. In most of these dual quad 426 setups, the front carb has nothing to do with low speed and idling. This carb has actually been modified with little set screws in here for idle mixture screws. And because it has its own idle speed screw, I actually can mix between the 2 of these when we're running it on the stand. It just makes me feel better about equal fuel distribution and stuff. I probably won't be able to sync them perfectly, but I like this better than just running on the back one. Spark plugs. Big blocks and Hemis actually use the same basic plug. High performance and low performance big blocks and Hemis use 2 different heat ranges though. Technically, this 35P, which is a Mopar branded plug that's actually just made by Champion. Kind of cool. Well, that is the heat range for the low performance option. Unfortunately, I don't have any of the correct 34Ps on hand. And I kind of need plugs to put in this now. So I'm going to run these. Down the line, we'll probably change it. Honestly, being off by 1 heat range, probably not going to make that big a difference. The 35P is 1 heat range hotter than the 34P. And what that means is in extreme conditions, this could act kind of like a glow plug, prematurely lighting off fuel mixture. That is the reason to use a colder plug in a high-performance engine like this with higher compression. This engine isn't going to see any load at all running on the stand, so I know it's totally fine. And honestly, once it's in a car, the way this thing is going to be driven, it's still probably totally fine, and the hotter plug will tend to keep itself a bit cleaner. This is hilarious. Mr. Customer, and obviously it had to be a Mr. Customer, you have had the best. A precision tune-up using Chrysler spark plugs, which again, we're just champions. So now I have to ruin these beautiful NOS packages, and I have to go through another step to make these plugs fit the Hemi correctly. I showed this in a Hemi video a long time ago, but it bears repeating. These things have spark plug tubes. That means you cannot leave the washers on the plugs. Back in the bad old days, washerless plugs were readily available, but the same cannot be said today, and so any plugs you're going to get are going to have these. If you've got an engine with these tubes, like a Slant 6 for example, you need to remove the washers. It's washer or plug tube, not both. Now, I would have used the set of plugs I already snipped like this last time I gave this car a tune-up, but apparently I threw them away. I don't see them in the parts pile. I must have had a good reason for doing that. Sparks, plugged. Plugs, wired. Don't have a coil yet. Still need to get fuel feed lines on here. And I'm sure I'm forgetting something else, but that is most of a runnable Hemi. For now, I'm gonna put a little blankie on its head and come back to this tomorrow, when hopefully we will finally be making 426 Hemi noises. I can't wait. Oh, here we go. A real Mopar. It's the next day and things have happened. For one thing, the engine's like almost outside. For another, there's exhaust hanging on it. And there's all kinds of other stuff too. It's currently full of water for the break-in. We're pressure testing it to about 16 pounds. That's what our cap's rated for. We had a couple dribbles initially, but it's holding perfectly now. Evan did most of the cart setup. He installed the fuel lines. We looped the hoses on the fuel pump so it won't make a horrible mess. We're running it on an electric pump. Currently trying to scare up some ethanol-free premium to put in our tank there. Things are looking good. Evan, watching me wire this horrible contraption, walks up with a fire extinguisher. Good thinking. The gas is staying in the gas places. So far, anyway. Nice. I did wire the choke open. I almost forgot. I stand corrected. That's leaking gas. I think it's from this one. We had to move this one. Every single time I do this, the timing is late. I'm sure this won't be any exception. Because this has a Pertronic system in it, I can't do the test light points thing or resistance check. So I'm just eyeballing it. Prime it. All right, here goes something. Nice. Well, that was easy. Coming out of exhaust ports, not the valve cover. That's the little bit of oil I didn't get out with the vacuum, and it ends up coming out here. We don't have a perfect seal. Obviously there's no gasket in there. The factory didn't use one. Probably need to have these manifolds milled. One's a little thirsty, boys. Don't pour that everywhere. 50 psi oil pressure, sitting at 186, 187. That's looking great. It sounds amazing. Nothing pouring out the bottom yet, but give it a minute. Because I'm like halfway through. I, for one, like the sound of rusty chunks rolling around in the exhaust. Stay. 34 psi at about 1850 RPM. A little bit lower, but still safe. Got some oil back here, and I'm a little concerned. That may be from the drain back hole in the head gasket. It looks like a lot more than I saw around the exhaust on the other side. We're gonna have to keep an eye on this. Apparently that's pretty common. No oil at any other corner, just that rear driver. I'm gonna be really annoyed if I have to pull that head. Still creeping a little bit. 204 degrees. We're at 30 psi oil now. We are almost done here. Yeah, we're good. These fans do seem to help, but it's a Hemi with a small radiator. What do you expect? Now there's a fan. Nice. Yep, it's a Hemi. Rad. Well, good news, bad news. Good news, Hemi runs. Sounds pretty great. I heard a very mild ticking noise. Pretty sure we just need to go through the valve adjustment again. I don't think it's eating itself. I think we still have 16 happy lifters. Despite being a basic stock reproduction hydraulic cam, this thing sounds amazing when it revs. Pretty cool. And now for the bad news. We've got an oil leak back here at the rear corner of the head. There are oil drainback passages in the corners of a Hemi head, and apparently it's pretty common to see leaks around them on these things. I did verify that the hole in our gasket lined up with the block and the head, and everything looks pretty good in that area. Some people will actually put extra sealant around these holes on the head gaskets, and at this point, obviously, I'm kind of wishing I'd done that. Real quick, while this thing's still rigged up on the stand, I'm going to go in and retorque the head bolts. Maybe we'll get lucky and that'll magically fix it, but probably not. Again, to pull the valve cover, I had to pull the spark plugs. You can see a little bit of oil got on these as I took them out. It's not the worst mess I've ever seen. The plugs look pretty darn good. On a normal day, I'd be retorquing these things right now, but instead I'm taking them off. Valve cover's off, and we're looking at shiny Hemi valve train again. See the little happy pools of oil going down into the plug holes? That is why it smokes on startup after you do this, every single time. I will try and vacuum it again. I'm sure you noticed the little puffs of smoke when it first fired. It's impossible to get it all out of there, but we can try. Man, I just love this. How could you not? Little issues or no, I get to hang out with this engine all day. I built this thing, and it ran and sounded amazing. Good times. Okay, this was a good idea. Steady. Thank you. That might have been enough to do something for our leak, but why do these take that much more torque? Obviously, I'll check the other side later. These covers do still have to come off for paint, so that's fine. Small problem, I can't get to the studs in the valley because there's an intake in the way, and I don't really want to pull that. I'm certainly not going to right now. If I have to, well, I do have another set of the corks, although, you know, I don't think I like those after all. We are seeping a little bit here. Every time. Now for the other little issue. This gauge, which is obviously in absolutely mint shape at this point, was showing 10 psi oil pressure hot at 800 RPM. And I'm not really in love with that. I'd like to see at least 20. Recall, this engine has not only fully grooved main bearings, but fully grooved main journals. And all of that means a much larger volume of oil is going to be reaching the rods in this thing. I suspect that all of the pressure missing from that gauge is puking out around those rod bearings, and there's really not a whole lot we can do about that. If this was a pump problem, like, say, a stuck bypass valve, for example, well, we'd be seeing 0 psi hot idle, and we aren't seeing that. We're currently running the same oil in this thing that we run in all of our fresh engines, that is driven break-in oil. This is a 1040. I think we're probably going to need to step it up to a 2050 to protect this Hemi. We'll give up a little bit in frictional losses, but gain some pressure on that gauge, hopefully, and a little bit of peace of mind. We're already running a high volume oil pump here, so there's really nothing else we can do on that end of things. You might be thinking, Jamie, shim the bypass valve. That'll raise the pressure. Yes, it will, at high RPM. At idle, the bypass valve is closed and doing nothing, so there's no point in worrying about this at all. One other note on this, of course, when we were seeing that reading, this engine had been run for a bit. It was fully heat soaked to 205 degrees or even a little bit higher. And that's going to thin out the oil as much as it would ever be thinned. It might well be fine, but this is a Hemi, and if ever there were an engine we needed to worry about the oil pressure in, it's this one. Now we're doing this again. It works surprisingly well. You just can't get every little bit down around the rings. Come on, go in the hole. Need more hands for this. No, don't rain on my parade. Tell you what, I'm getting way too good at putting these back together. Nice. This exhaust is full of fun noises. I probably should mention that yes, there are chunks rattling around in these old mufflers, but the main noise is actually the flapper valve in the passenger manifold. The spring's off it currently, and so it's just doing the happy dance. It's fine. Obviously don't want to let this fresh engine idle for long, but they're at 750 where it seems surprisingly happy. And currently 150 degrees water temperature. We've got 30 PSI, which is great. We'll run it for a few minutes and see if oil comes pouring out. Oh, I could so get used to that. Okay. So far, there's nothing here. I don't have much more fuel or time, but I really want to make sure this is good. Water temp almost 175. Still got about 20 PSI of oil. And that's it, right about 800 RPM. Honestly, I think we're okay here. I do still think stepping up to 2050, probably a good move. When it was running last time, I wiped this about a minute and a half, 2 minutes before we shut it down. By the time I idled it down, there was a trail of oil like this right there. I've had it running for about 5-6 minutes now. There's nothing. So I think retorquing the head did it. And again, I will do that on the other side later as well. And I'll pull this intake, fix the end seal thing, just get rid of the corks altogether like I should have. And I'll retorque the nuts in the valley. Yep, we like it. Oh, I'm not hearing any valve noise either. Good enough for me. What a good day. Big block Valiant noises. Oh, I made this thing run 1,000 times better, by the way. I also gave it an alignment. Yep, it's aligned, kind of. Well, that, amazingly, was a rousing success. What did we learn? I don't know. Not much. Tell you what, I'm getting more and more excited for Hemi number 2. I don't know when we're actually going to see that. Hopefully soon. At some point in the future, we'll be cleaning this thing up, detailing it right, doing all those things I said, painting it a fresh coat of Hemi orange, and dropping it back in a 1970 Hemi Cuda. Until then, I suppose, as ever, thank you very much for watching. And remember, follow your dreams. And someday, you might be rebuilding Hemis for money. They're fun. Did I get paid for this? Whatever.